Welcome to the Build a Life After Loss podcast, uplifting support for your grief and healing journey. We're here to encourage your hope in the future and strengthen your confidence so that you can build a life of purpose and joy. I'm your host, Julie Clough, certified grief coach. Hello, my friends. Welcome to episode 95, Love Hard with Gaylene Moyers. Before we jump into the interview that I have for you today, I want to remind you that by the time this airs, tomorrow night, we're doing a webinar. We've got our Build a Life After Loss webinar. And these webinars are so awesome and helpful because you get to visually see some of the things we talk about on the podcast, as well as we just go deeper. And this week, we're going to talk about the left brain, the right brain, how they interact with grief and how to lean into that, because grief is really supposed to be part of our healing journey, but we see it as a problem. And so if we kind of understand a little better, we can work with it instead of against it. We'll also be talking about the thought, feeling, behavior cycle, and how that is affected by grief and the things that you can do to work with that. So super informative. I hope you'll join us. You can register at bit.ly, that's bit.ly/BLAL September. And that's with a capital S spelled out, September. So again, bit.ly/BLAL September with a capital S. All right. I want to introduce you to Gaylene. I met her through a mutual friend, and she is a wife. She's a mom of 8. She's a GG to 13. Her family is her greatest treasure and joy, and she is a survivor of child loss, and she helps others in their journey to find joy after the loss of a child as well. She's a grief support coach where she uses nature to assist in the healing process. She loves all things outdoors, especially hiking, camping, paddleboarding, and has recently fallen in love with mountain biking. She founded the Kylie Bruce Memorial Foundation and Love Hard Project. Thus the name of this podcast, Love Hard. The Love Hard Project is these foundations are in memory of her daughter, Kylie. She is working on her program called Tell Grief to Take a Hike, which is due soon if it's not out already. So let's jump right into the interview. Welcome to the podcast, Gaylene. We're excited to have you here. And I've got Gaylene Moyers with me.
Well, thank you. I'm excited to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah. Well, let's just jump right in. Tell us a little bit about your story and what happened and your, let's just hear what happened first.
Okay. So, December 20th, 2016, we lost our 24-year-old daughter in a car accident. She was, I think, 18 weeks pregnant with her first baby.
Wow.
And they still really don't know what happened, whether it was just, it was snowy outside, but not super slick. And she just lost control and went across 2 lanes of traffic and then was hit in the passenger side of her car, which broke her neck. And so she pretty much passed immediately.
Wow.
Yeah. She was headed to play basketball.
Say that again?
She was headed to play basketball in another town that was pretty close by. And
Wow.
Yeah.
So did your daughter live near you or?
So she lived, at the time, we probably lived about 3.5 hours away from each other or so. Mm-hmm. And her brothers were the ones that were actually contacted. Well, she was going to play basketball and she was going to pick up a friend and her phone wasn't working. And so her friend, Kristen, called Kylie, that's my daughter, called Kylie's boyfriend and said, hey, Kylie's not here yet. Do you know, when did she leave? Is she gone yet? And he said, yeah. And so then Kristen called back a little bit later and then he got a little bit worried. And so out the door, and they lived kind of right off of the highway. And so he looked out and saw these lights and everything, and traffic backed up. And so it was only about, half a mile or a quarter of a mile from their house. And so he just, ran down the road thinking that she was just stuck in traffic because there was an accident. And then eventually found out that it was actually Kai that was in the accident.
My word. Mm. So how did you find out?
So when Brandon found out, he called my sons, who lived a little bit closer than I did to them. And so my oldest son is the one that called me and told me about it. I was at a lady's house that I took care of each night after work, who had a stroke. And so he called me right as I was leaving work from her house and let me know.
My word. So tell me a little bit about your response and how that felt and what that looked like for you.
Well, first of all, when he called me, he said, "Hey," kind of made some small talk, and then he said, I have some news that's not so good. And my first thought was that it was his wife, because she is from Mexico, and she had just gotten her driver's license. And I thought, oh my gosh, my bear and the girls have been in a car accident. So my first thought was, oh my gosh, how am I going to soothe my son, from an accident? So I was trying to figure out how I was going to serve him. And then he told me the news, and then it just, I had to completely turn that around and be like, oh, this is me that's having this problem now. So I pulled over to the side of the road, and, I just basically yelled, oh God, don't take my baby.
Mm-hmm.
And it just felt like so unreal, but so final. It had like both of those aspects. I'm just like, okay, this is not real. But then when it hit me, it's like, oh yeah, it is. And super final. So I think those were the two things that went through my mind, is just, well, and then, how can this happen, and how am I going to survive?
Mm-hmm. So what did surviving look like for you for the next little while?
Being busy. It looked like getting all of the kids together. So we have 8 children.
Mm-hmm.
And we got all the kids together, went out to my oldest son's house, because he lived on a ranch where there were lots of other like little cabins, so that we could all gather together and try to figure out, what our next step was. So I was really busy getting that together, busy figuring out the program, busy, getting everything printed, busy just, talking about it and figuring out what we were going to do next. And then, so that was the 20th. And so we met together for a couple of days, talked about everything, pretty much got everything planned. And then we all went home for Christmas, and then came back 2 or 3 days after Christmas, and her service was like December 31st. So it was a whirlwind, and it was super busy. And so right after that is, I maybe took 1 or 2 more days off, and then went back to work after the first of the year. So being busy is what survival looked like for me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Did that serve you well? How did that work for you, staying busy?
It served me well, because I had learned also that I still needed to grieve, and I needed to feel the feelings.
Mm-hmm.
So I did allow myself to do that, and I was in a position where that could happen. I had an office by myself, so between patients, if I felt like I needed to cry, or just take that minute of silence or whatever, I was able to do that. So I felt like, and busy has just always kind of been my been my go-to, because I always feel like I need to, and this might sound like a bad thing, but like for me, it's not. So I always feel like I need to be productive.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't always look like being super busy. It can mean to me also taking time to just be still and to feel what I'm feeling, but that still is productive to me, because I'm still working toward that grieving process and that recovery process.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So it sounds to me like you kind of recognized that feeling, what you were feeling is really the pathway.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it is. And so many times I would just, when I talk to people, I'm like, I still don't know how I'm going to survive with a part of my heart and soul gone. Like, how do people survive? How do they do that?
Mm-hmm.
I was still trying to figure that out. And some days I still am.
Yeah. Did you have a sense that it was possible, though?
That it was possible to survive
To
with that?
survive and to move forward, yeah.
I did. And the main thing that gave me that sense is that I kept thinking about how Kylie would want me to proceed with my life. So she was a go-getter. She was, she just had a work ethic like crazy. She loved to be active and busy and serving people. And I knew that is kind of the legacy that I needed to leave to like honor her as well, because I knew she couldn't do those things anymore physically. And so it was my responsibility to heal and recover in a way that would honor that memory of her, and not just, she would, she'd probably like come down and haunt me or whatever if I just decided to curl up in a ball and not be productive, that she wouldn't like that at all.
How do you kind of balance those two things where you feel this need to grieve, but then you also have this sense that she wouldn't want you to be grieving forever.
Right.
She would want you to be going out and serving and doing.
Mm-hmm. So that's that's a good question. So I am busy, and what I have done with that memory and that legacy that I want to leave in honor of her is we started a Facebook group called Love Hard Project, because after she died, there were some women who I was in a weightlifting group with, like a weightlifting group, and they started the hashtag like Flex for Kylie, first of all, and then Live Happy and Love Hard. So those were like these hashtags that just kind of came about as people started hearing her story. And so I created the Love Hard Project, and that is a Facebook group. And that's where what I wanted for it mainly was just for it to be a place of really positive energy, because at the time she died, we were having all the political stuff and it was just super negative. And I wanted a place where there was this really positive energy and just good things all the time. And then it kind of transitioned. The members are the ones actually that kind of transitioned it into a place where they also came to share their grief stories, and they also came to ask for support and prayers, and how am I going to be able to live without my mom or without my daughter, whatever it was. And so the members kind of shifted that, and I just allowed that, because I feel like grief is so still taboo, even it's 2020 and we still don't talk about it, and we still are uncomfortable with it. And so I just let them kind of go with that. And so that's pretty much what it's turned into being. So I created the group, which I felt like was a really good way to honor her memory and let people talk about their grief. And then I just try to find things to keep myself serving. And like right now, my passion is to end human trafficking. So I'm really, really into that. And I'm in a group where we're really focusing on helping with that. So so I think just feeling that all and letting others come into that group, and then also having my own passion where I am serving people because I know that that's what she would want me to do.
Yeah. Yeah. You do it to honor her and to honor your own life too. Sounds like. Yeah, that's good. So you mentioned before that like you've kind of stayed busy through all this, but you also allowed your feelings.
Mm-hmm.
Share with us a little bit about what that looks like, allowing your feelings. What does that look like for you?
So I have a ritual for my mornings that I almost always do. I almost never forget to do it or push it off. And part of that is being silent, like having at least 15 to 20 minutes before my day starts to just be silent, to feel what I'm, the things that are coming up and how I'm going to handle those throughout the day, so that I can just maybe more just have that clarity about how I'm going to handle whatever comes up during the day. And a lot of times it will be like those feelings of missing her, and the last times that we spent together talking for a long time, or just those things that come up that I remember. Because one of the things that I think a lot of parents worry about is that they're going to forget what their kid was like, or what they sounded like, or what the things that they did with them. And that's a really real fear, for me, is like, I don't know if I'm going to remember all this stuff. So when it comes up, I make sure to write it down. So the ritual is that, just spending that time, alone by myself, and making sure that I don't skip that, so that I, can continue to feel like the heartache or the loneliness or whatever I am, that's coming up for me that day.
Mm-hmm. A lot of parents deal with having to go back to work just a few days after a child has died. Mm-hmm. And you mentioned that you went back to work after Christmas, just a few days after the end of the year, I guess. What do you have any thoughts, like any tips for parents that do find themselves in a position where they need to go back to work and they're still feeling that overwhelming heaviness and sadness?
Yeah, my biggest tip, and probably like the hardest thing to do, is to just ask people for grace, to say I'm still really vulnerable right now. like my feelings are just like right here, I'm wearing them just right here. And so if I need you, can you please be available for me? Or, can you, if, like, I work in the medical field. And so there was a time just not very long ago, like about a month ago, that I was just having a hard week. And so, but I was able to say, you know what, I'm having a really hard time right now. So, sorry. So if if you see me struggling, can you please go room my patient, or, whatever it was I was doing. And my work family is so amazing, and they just pitched in if they saw that I was struggling. They asked me what I needed. And, not everybody is blessed to have a work family like that. And not everybody is blessed to have someone come in and take over for them if they need. But I really do feel like that's the main thing. If you have to go back to work and those feelings are still so raw, and so new, we just need to learn to ask. And, most of the time when we do that, people are very, very willing to help. Like, we just don't think they are, because we want to be self-sufficient. We don't want to ask for help. We want to be the ones that are helping people. But it's also nice to let other people have the blessings of helping out as well.
Yeah, I agree. And I think coming from a place of being willing to help others, it gives you, I think it makes it a little easier to ask for help too.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes. And I think that,
Yeah.
I think that's a huge tip for people, is that they really do have to be more transparent. They can't go back to work with just this, I'm the same person I was before, because you're not
Right.
the same person you were before, right?
Yeah, not at all.
Yeah. And so it's, I think when we can communicate to people how we're feeling, the help that we need, and why we're responding the way we are, they're much more likely to be in our corner, to understand what's going on. There's less likelihood of misunderstanding, because if you just go back like, I'm the same person, and then those emotions invariably come out, and then people think, well, maybe it's me, and then they don't even know, they don't understand. Because like you said earlier, grief has been taboo. I don't understand it. Why it is that way, because we all experience loss. Everybody experiences loss, which means we all experience grief. And why we make it this hidden, taboo, off topic, I don't know. Tell me a little bit more about kind of your discoveries about the taboo of grief, and maybe the things that you've learned about grief that you didn't know before.
Yeah. So, after Kylie died, probably it was a year, and I moved to a different little town. And this town has a grief support group. And my daughter that lives here went to that support group. It was shortly after Kylie died, actually, that round of the support group. But she recommended it to me, and so I went to the group, and I had some really, so I thought that I went there to talk about like my grief journey with Kylie, but I really soon discovered that I had not grieved my parents' death, and not in a healthy way, because I was 19 when they died, and I took my brother and sister, who were 15 and 13, into my home, and I don't remember one single time like sitting them down and saying, you guys, how are you feeling? What can I help you with? Because I never let them see me cry, because at that point in my life, I thought, oh, I have to be strong for my brother and sister. Now I am their sibling, but I'm also now kind of like their parent. And so it was a really weird and hard, like, relationship kind of transition. But that is in my head how I felt like I needed to grieve. And I don't know who put that there. I don't know where that came from, other than just, you got to be strong for someone else, forget about you for a minute and be strong for these teenage kids. So I learned really quickly that I didn't grieve them in a healthy manner, or even thoroughly, and so now I'm kind of on the work of getting that process under my belt, and I'm doing well with that. But I just wish that I would have been more available for them, as far as like, what are your feelings? I mean, they were 13 and 15, and they didn't have that outlet, so what I've learned is that, to let it be open, and to let them talk about their loved one that they have lost, if they feel comfortable doing that, but don't ever like not say the person's name, because you're afraid that it's going to bring up bad memories, or make them sad or whatever. And it might make them sad, but what's even more sad is that their loved one is forgotten if you don't speak their name, and if you don't allow them to grieve them as well. So that's probably the biggest takeaway, is just learning um, learning the difference from when I was younger and whatever got into my head at that point that I was supposed to be strong for everyone, and then transitioning into being more vulnerable and asking people for help and telling them how I feel and not hiding that.
Mm-hmm. Yes, so many gold nuggets in what you just talked about. So many important things. This idea that we have to be strong. I imagine you as a 19-year-old being put in this position where all of a sudden you are the adult.
Mm-hmm.
You are the person that they're looking to. So it makes sense that you would have had this thought that, I just have to be strong. I can't let down my guard. I'm the adult now. So this is how we adult. I think the problem is that we, as a society, we don't talk about emotions and feelings. We don't acknowledge our emotions and feelings, and we think of it almost as a weakness to have emotions, when in reality that's our strength. Otherwise we're robots.
Right.
So
yeah, exactly.
our emotions are really important, and this idea that to be open and to talk about the people that we've lost, so that they are remembered in our day-to-day, in our experiences, in our conversations. Really, really important. And when we're able to be vulnerable with other people, it gives them permission to be vulnerable also. Have you found that?
Yes. Yeah. Those that it was very interesting when I started in the grief support group. We were all just a little bit guarded, because number one, we didn't know each other. There were a few of them that knew each other, but I was brand new in town. I didn't know anybody. And so we were all a little bit guarded, and, we all felt pretty vulnerable. But by the time we all got done, we were all just like, wow, I'm not crazy. There's someone else that feels this way. I'm not the only one that can't focus on things for more than 2 minutes, And so just those little things that we all had problems with at the beginning, and maybe still, but we found out that there were more people out there like us, and then that made us feel like, and there are even more people out there that aren't in this class. People are walking around all over the world who have experienced horrible loss, and we're not the only ones. We're not alone, but hopefully when we meet those people that have experienced loss, we can also, have that compassion and empathy for them, because we know what it feels like to lose someone.
Yeah. So talk a little bit about compassion. How has your compassion changed through this experience?
Well, before losing a child, the thing in your head is like, oh my gosh, the worst thing I can think of is losing a child. Even people who don't have children say that that's their worst, that they would think that was the worst thing that could happen to someone, is losing a child. And so, you're walking around out there and someone loses a child, and like, for me, I didn't know what to say. I'm mostly, what I said was, I don't have any words for this because I have no idea how it is. It's got to be horrible. And so, but let me know if there's anything I can do, or I would just do something for someone. Whereas now I can maybe put more of a voice to it, and I can say, I could say something like, that hole in your heart really sucks, doesn't it? And to just be open and out like that with how I felt about it, and how I'm pretty sure most people who've lost children feel about it. I think it helps people to relax a little bit, number one, and they can be like, oh my gosh, yeah, that's exactly what I feel like. There's a hole in my heart, and this really does feel horrible. I hate it. And then we can kind of talk about that. So the compassion has changed from just like this general thing of, I don't know what to say, but it must be awful, to being able to pinpoint how someone might feel, or I could say I hated how that hole in my heart felt. What do you hate about this?
Mm-hmm.
And then we can kind of open up that discussion. But I always make sure to tell them, like, I don't ever say, I know how you feel, because I don't know how they feel. I know how it feels to lose a child. And that's what I say. It's like, I do not know how you feel having lost your child, but I know for me, losing my child felt awful. I hated it. And I'm still, whatever, I still hate it. It still sucks. And so I make sure to let their grief be their own grief, because it's not mine. I don't know what they feel like to grieve, but I know what it feels like to lose a kid. So
Yeah. So if you could share just like one or two, maybe more things that you feel like were pivotal for you in your own journey through grief and recovery, what would those things be?
Well, some of the things that I am working out in, that I'm writing about in my program is, first of all, I was so blessed to be able to have done some inner work. Like before this happened, I was kind of like working on myself because I'd had some other things go on. So just kind of being able to dig deep and pull that stuff out of there and face it and like get rid of it, that was a huge help. But if we're talking about just the things that that kind of help me on a day-to-day basis, being grateful, having my gratitude journal and not skipping that when the horrible things happen, it was huge for me. Like, even if it's just 3 little things that I write down every day, and putting it on paper and actually writing it, helps me keep it in my head better. So I always do a gratitude journal. Journaling in particular, I have to admit that I'm not super great at that, like just writing out my feelings and stuff. But I do have a journal that one of my very good friends sent me after Kylie died, and it just has little prompts in there, things that like I might not think about to write about. And sometimes I'm okay and I can do that, and other times it just brings back too much stuff, so I can't. So journaling once in a while works for me, and sometimes it doesn't. Being out in nature by myself is almost, I have to do that. I have to get out, and I have to do that at least, once a week, like on a weekend or something, taking a walk after work, whatever it happens to be. But nature is really where I feel like I healed the most. That was the most I can think when I'm there. I can like concentrate, and just I guess just like the quiet and the beauty that's there just soothes my soul. And so that helps me so much. And then also, making sure that you take care of yourself, because it's hard to get sleep sometimes when you're so upset and when you're so worried about things. But making sure that, I get enough sleep, and making sure that I'm taking care of myself. And even if it's just like one day I concentrate on drinking enough water, that's my thing. That's my self-care thing for the day. And then we talked about this, but probably I would say at the top of my list, and this is when people, this is like when you feel like you can get out and you can start doing that, but I feel like the sooner the better, is to find some way to serve. Find some way to serve someone else. There's people out there all the time that need service. And especially if you can look at it in the way that your loved one is not here and able to do that physically anymore. So it's your responsibility to kind of, go out and do the things that you are still capable of doing, and in their honor. So that's what helps me the most. It's like, okay, what can I do to serve somebody that would be honorable for, the mission that I'm trying to accomplish in, leaving a legacy in honor of Kylie and leaving a legacy for myself. What would she be proud of me for? If that's how you have to do it, then do it that way, because service is one of the things that, when you're lost in the service of someone else, all of your trouble seems to be just a little less important, or a little less, it's not as big, and it doesn't take over your life as much. So those are the things that I would say are probably the most important things for me, and finding something that you're really passionate about. Like I mentioned, I'm passionate about, we're recording this on July 30th, which is World Against Trafficking Day. And so, just find something that you're super passionate about, and just donate or volunteer wherever you can, and in honor of your loved one, if that's how you have to, get yourself out there and start serving people.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for sharing that. I do think that there is something to serving others, and it doesn't always have to be in huge organized ways. I mean, I've seen people who have experienced so much healing from just doing it in an organized way, like volunteering for an organization an hour or 2 hours a week or something like that. Or, in my own experience, after my kids died, it was my daughter's birthday. So my daughter was 10 and my son was 8 when they died in a car accident. And it was my daughter's birthday, and it had been a couple of years after the accident, and I was in a doctor's office, and I just overheard one of the nurses on the phone trying to make arrangements for her brother's funeral. And they were having trouble because they didn't have the money to pay for it. And as I listened, I just kept thinking, there's got to be something I can do. And I gave her a check. I wrote out a check, and I said, I don't know if this little bit will help. And I'm sorry I overheard your conversation, but I was in the same room, so she had to have known.
Right.
I would have heard. And it just made my heart happy I felt like this is my gift today for my daughter.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah.
And so it's just kind of like opening our eyes a little bit to things that we can do. And it can be such small little things. We just see somebody struggling going through a parking lot trying to carry their bags. Right now we've got coronavirus going on, so people might be a little cautious if you come and say, can I help you with that? But it's it is just kind of opening our eyes to the fact that other people might be are suffering also. But I think when you do the work that you're doing, where you're vocal about your experience, and you're vulnerable about, how hard it is, and the things that you have to do to and one thing that I wanted to just mention is, as you've talked, I've thought about, like, one of the keys to rebuilding, to healing, and then rebuilding is willingness. And you have really demonstrated a willingness to do the work of grief.
Yeah,
to not just
work. It's hard work.
It is work. Yeah. It's definitely work. And it's, a lot of times we hear the old saying, time heals all wounds. And we think that if we just sit around long enough, this is not really the way it works. And the fact that you're willing to go to a support group, the fact that you're willing to go out and give yourself that time in nature, that you're willing to ask for help and to be vulnerable and saying, look, I'm having a hard week, or this is hard, and this is what I might not show up the way that I did before. In fact, I won't, is super important.
Yeah.
I would love for you to share what you're doing now, how people can find you, and any other last minute, not last minute, but any last thoughts that you have.
Okay, thank you. So I have a group on Facebook called, it's #LoveHardProject. And that's the group I talked about a little bit earlier. And then you can find my little grief cheat sheet that is kind of a precursor to the program that I am writing at tellgrieftotakeahike.com. And that'll just give you the little overview of it, and then put you on a list so that you know when I have launched my product, and you'll just get all the little goodies after that. And then Love Hard Project. Also, I have a Facebook page, Love Hard Project.
Okay.
So we're just kind of in the new stages of things, kind of deciding, how we want to go about this, and, what that's all going to look like. But I really am excited to get my program out, and, just hope that I shared something that is of value to someone that they have been struggling with, and my experience maybe has helped them just a little bit feel that little nudge or that push to do the work of healing and do the work of grieving. And you're right, time doesn't heal everything. It's what you do at that time that is going to help you heal.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thanks so much for being with us, Gaylene.
Oh, thank you so much. It's been great.
I want to thank Gaylene for sharing her story with such vulnerability and rawness, and helping us learn as we go through our own journeys. So thank you, Gaylene. Before we go, I want to ask you a favor. If you have found this episode helpful, or the other episodes that you've listened to of Build a Life After Loss, will you please rate and review the podcast? That would be so helpful, and it helps others find it. And as always, I want to remind you that if you need help with your own grief and your own journey and moving forward, I highly recommend you schedule your free discovery call. It is free. It is free. We'll talk, and I think you'll find it very, very helpful. Have a beautiful week. Remember, I believe in you. Love you. Bye.